All right, thanks for taking the time to join me for this little training. On Fridays, we like to do a forms and systems training, and we've decided to break that up a little bit. So we just recently recorded a training on how to use .loop, and today I'm going to be doing a little training on how to fill out some of the basic forms. I have a new agent sitting here by my side, so I've instructed him if he has questions to go ahead and ask them to make this realistic for you. But this is designed primarily for agents that are new to the business, not just new to equity real estate, because we're just going to be talking about how to fill out some of the basic forms on the MLS. So I'm logged into the MLS right now, and I can come here to Forms at the top of the page, and I'm going to create a new form. Now I'm going to show you today how to create or how to write up an offer, as well as how to create a form that gets you a listing client and a buyer client as well. So if I go to listings, by the way, all the forms are right here on the left side of the tab or of the page. And if you scroll down, there's a lot of forms. One of the homework items I recommend to anybody watching this is for your first few months and possibly forever, I'd love for you to have a habit of improving your knowledge. But I would like you to start at the top. Just read the name of the form, and if you don't immediately picture that form and the different sections in that form, then I think it's a great idea to take 15 minutes a day and just chip away at that list. Read the form. If you're familiar with it, then click down to the next one. If you're familiar with that one, and work your way down that list and make sure you're aware of it. Also be aware that these forms are updated on a regular basis. And if you ever see this red updated one, make sure you get in there and are aware of those changes, because you are held responsible for that. This is called the standard level of service that we provide. And if we're not providing updated knowledge to our clients, then we do have liability, because the standard for a professional in our industry is to know those things. All right, so in this case, let's say I want a new listing. Well, I've got a couple of different options here, sub-agency, things like that. We're almost always going to be using designated agency. So I'm going to add that one to my list to fill out. If I click right on the form directly, it'll just open up the form for me. But right now I want to show you guys several different forms, so we're going to do this. One quick thing that I want to point out to you is we do have some forms that are available over here. Like if we're supposed to send our client the lead-based paint pamphlet, it's available there. And sometimes agents start focusing on this side and forget this over here. Like if I need a residential listing input form, it's over here. It's not over here. So, all right, we wanted the listing form, and then we're going to scroll down to the buying form. By the way, this is one of the very few places where some of the terms that you learned in real estate school actually apply, where when we're a listing agent, we're representing the seller. When we're a selling agent, we're representing the buyer. We never use this lingo in real life, but here it does apply. So selling means this is the buyer's side, all right? And we're going to scroll down here, and again, we're looking for designated agency. I'm going to check that one. The next thing that we're going to do is as if we were wanting to write an offer. So I'm going to scroll down here to a real estate purchase contract, and I'm also going to show you just a standard addendum. Again, there's a lot of different things that these forms address, so we're just going to do a standard basic one. I'm also going to throw in the FHA VA addendum, since that comes up pretty frequently. Now that I've got all the forms that I want to work with today, I'm going to go up here and create a packet. All right. At any time with this drop-down menu, I can look at the different forms in the packet, but for now I'm just going to go through them in order and get them filled out. I can click this little shortcut box for show hide common fields. Now if I'm working with a listing, and in this case I'm looking at buyer packets, listing packets, and everything. But if I were just working with a listing, I could put in the MLS number, and it's going to auto-fill the address and other things from the listing right in to this, which is very handy. For right now, I've got Bob Buyer as the buyer name. I'm going to put Sandy Seller as the seller name. And then, of course, I could put today as the day of the offer, and it will autofill all of that stuff when I hit fill update fields. So that's a little shortcut that you can do, and it'll fill all of those fields out as we go through the form. So we see that Sandy Seller's already in here. I'm already in here. Now, on an exclusive right to sell listing agreement, we've got a date right here, and some agents do make the mistake of not reading, which I'm going to encourage you as part of your homework to actually get in and read every single line in each of these forms to make sure that you understand how they work. In this case, the mistake that agents make is they think that this is the start date. All right? This is not the start date. This is the end date. And so if I screwed up and I put today in here, then my contract started and ended at the exact same time, which kind of screws me as far as protection goes. So I want this to be an effective date. Typically, I do about 6 months. So I just kind of look at my calendar. It's May 12th today. So I'm going to put the 12th day of May, June, July, August, September, October, November, 2017. And I can put the property address in there as well. Now, on a listing agreement, my commission, let's say I'm going to do a 6%. Some agents put in 3% there, and then they go and post it on the MLS, advertising that they're going to pay 3% to a buyer's agent. You are responsible for paying that buyer's agent, and that's per your part of belonging to the MLS. And so if you only charge your client a 3% brokerage fee, then you would have to give every bit of that over to the buyer's agent, and you don't make a dime. So make sure that you put the full brokerage fee in there, which is 3% for you plus 3% for a buyer's agent. Now with equity, you have a unique power that most brokerages don't give their agents. So if you're new to us and you've never had any experience with other brokerages, most brokerages don't let you negotiate this. You have to go to your broker like a used car salesman and say, hey, can I give my mom a discount or a deal? And they say yes or no. With us, you know your fee at the end of the day is $4.99 plus the $60 transaction fee. So if you want to charge your mom a flat fee of $1,000, then you can put that in there, get rid of the percentage, and that's what you got. Now remember, this is a listing form, so we got to pay 3% to a buyer's agent. So we could do $1,000 plus 3%. We could type it in like that. All right, but be very aware that you have to pay a buyer's agent. That's your responsibility when you post it on the MLS. So we're going to leave it at 6%. All right. Protection period, I typically do 3 or 4 months. You could put 6 months down here. And again, I'm not going to explain to you what these different things are because I expect you to read through it. And as always, if you have questions with it, then you can let me know. And then we just scroll down here. Really, everything is pretty straightforward. It is now state law, actually, to disclose where you got your square footage from. So if it came from an old appraisal, then, well, you could click appraisal right here. They would probably anticipate you have a copy of that appraisal rather than going off of somebody's memory. You could put a previous MLS listing. Those things aren't necessarily reliable, but you do have to disclose where you got it from, where you got the information. All right, there typically are not any attachments to this. My client is not a foreign person, they're a citizen, and that's about it. So I've got all of this stuff done. What I'm going to do eventually when I finish filling it all out here, I'm going to save it as a PDF, and then I'm going to upload it into .loop, and I'll send it to my client for signatures there. All right, but for now, I'm going to move on to the next form and show you how to fill out a buyer agreement. All right, in this case, same thing as far as the dates go. I'm going to put it 6 months out, so that would be, again, the 12th of November. Now, with buyers, we could, let's say that they're not sure where they're going to buy, okay? And maybe they've got an agent that's already showed them some homes, and they live all the way down in Utah County, and I'm operating in Cache Valley, and they've told me they want to live in one or the other area, but they've already signed an agreement to work with an agent in Utah County. Now, I can actually sign a separate exclusive buyer broker agreement to work with them in Cache County at the same time because it specifies that we're in different areas. Now, I will typically put any county in Utah because I want to work with them wherever they go. But the truth is, if they want to buy down in Utah County or Washington County, someplace that I don't work at, then I can be specific. Now, sometimes we'll have clients that say, look, I want you to show me some homes, but I don't want to sign an agreement. In this case, I can pull this up and say, tell you what's fair. I show you the homes, and if you want to make an offer on anything, then you agree to pay me. And in that case, we can come in here and actually type in the specific address of the homes that I'm going to show them. And most people think that's fair. And they'll say, okay, that's fair. I don't really want to be committed to an agent, but it's fair that if you're showing me and I like that home, then I work with you. If they say, no, I'm not going to sign anything, then I say find another agent to show you the home then, okay? Because I don't work for free, and you do incur liability through agency by implication. My actions in showing them homes, it makes me look like I'm their agent. You know, I'm going to be talking to them. I might be giving them advice as we go through things, and I'm not going to do that without a representation form in hand, okay? Again, I make 3% here. There are some people out there I've heard give training that you put 0% here because you get paid by the listing agent. Now that's spelled out in here that I get 3% of the acquisition price, but the BAC paid to me by the listing brokerage shall satisfy this obligation, provided that it's not less than the amount shown above. Now what this does is it's becoming more and more common to see listing agents not offering us a full 3%. They might offer 2.5%, they might offer 2%. We've even got one swear word name agent. You can insert whatever swear word you want into that, up in Cache Valley, where they were offering a $1 buyer agent commission. Now, that means that if I had my client buy that house, I would actually be upside down in commissions because I'd have to pay equities commission fee, and they only would pay me $1. So you are not a hostage to that. This form, if you put 3% in here, allows you to negotiate. If you didn't, if you put 0 in here thinking that the listing brokerage is going to pay you, if the listing brokerage is only offering you $1, that's all you get, and you've got no leverage to negotiate there at all. So put the 3% in there. That allows you to negotiate later on if you want. You, of course, don't have to. So again, if you're working with your mother, then you can say, you know what, I'm okay. I'll do it for $600 or $1,000 or whatever and give my mom a deal. Again, I've got a 6-month protection period in here. And I'm not going to go over all the terms again because you should read those, all right? I don't have attachments, and that's it. I'm on to the next form. Any questions so far?
No, not yet.
Okay. All right. Now we're going to go through the process of making an offer. And again, I really love it when I've got the MLS listing in front of me and I've got the show hide common fields because it'll autofill a lot of this stuff. But I'm going to walk through this, and this one I am going to explain to you how to write an offer. So first of all, I'm trying to see, this webinar doesn't tell me how long I'm taking, so hopefully this video doesn't get too long. First of all, right up here at the top, I've got 2 options. I deliver to the buyer's brokerage with this offer some earnest money, or I deliver it within 4 days. I almost always do 4 days. If, however, my client has a check and they want to write it out and I want to collect that, then I can click this box and then I would sign the form right here. If I have not received the earnest money, if I don't have it in my hand, I do not sign this field right here, okay? And in fact, the way I like to do it is I like to have it delivered within 4 calendar days. It's going to be $1,000 is the standard number. If it's a great big home over 500,000, then you can do 5,000 or 10,000. It just makes the offer stronger. And in lower end homes, you could do $500, all right? And it's going to be in the form of a check, all right? Now, I can have this delivered to a title company, and I can put that language right here, or I can add an addendum later on, okay? But this says that it's going to be held by the brokerage, that I've got 4 calendar days to put it in the brokerage real estate trust account. That is not what I'm going to do. Our habit here at Equity, or our not habit, our policy is that we hold that with the title company, and we have that policy for various reasons. And if you've got a question on why, you can give me a call. But basically, it streamlines everything, all right? So I've got check to be delivered to advanced title in accordance with state law. Now, that autofilled, I actually take out in accordance with state law lately because state law says that the earnest money will be delivered within 3 days. But my contract says 4 days, and I want the terms of my contract to rule. Okay, so I don't want to make some confusion there. So check to be delivered to advanced title. And that is required by state law, that if we're changing something from what the brokerage, from what the contract says, we have to specify where it's going to be. All right, and come in here and Main Street in the city of, say it's Providence. Oh, sorry, that's the tax ID number. Also described as, typically we'll put a tax ID number in here, and that's found on the MLS sheet itself, okay? City of Providence, County of Cache, I don't know, okay? So I've got that filled out. Now, included items. It's going to mention some things in here that are typically included. Now, be very careful when you're filling this out to not take the lazy person's route and say as per MLS, because guess what the listing agent can do? They can jump on the MLS and change that anytime they want to. All right, so if there's something included in here, then you go through the energy of actually typing it in. Now, there's some things that we can check mark and make our lives easier if they're listed there, but otherwise, if they want the shed, then type in the shed. All right. On excluded items, same thing. We had an issue just a couple of weeks ago where there was a trashed hot tub. It didn't work, and they didn't want it, and they just assumed, since they didn't put it as an included item, that it would be cleaned up by the sellers. Don't ever assume anything, all right? Because your assumption may be different than their assumption, so be very clear. I don't want the hot tub. So hot tub is to be excluded from the sale. All right, water service right here just says that any water rights or shares that pertain to the property are going to be included. Now be aware that if there are, basically this section says the following water rights and shares are specifically excluded from this sale. So you'd only mention something if it's excluded from the sale. However, if you do have water rights and shares, you're going to want to later on go and make sure what those are. All right, so you're going to want to, sometimes they're with title companies, sometimes they're not. But if the seller says that there are water rights or shares that go with this, then there's, if it's shares, there'll be certificates, but you're going to want to find those and make sure that those are addressed separately, okay? So then we've got our purchase price. We're going to offer $200,000 for the home. We've put down $1,000 earnest money, and now it's just math. So I've got an FHA buyer. I know they're going to need to bring in 3%. That's $6,000. So my new loan is going to be for $193,000. The cash, again, is $6,000 that they've had to bring in. And if I add those things up, I've got $6,000 plus $193 plus $1,000. Again, I've got my $200,000 there. All right. Now, it is important for you to know, and again, I expect you to read through all of this, but I'm going to highlight a couple of things. Any amounts shown in 2B through 2D, okay, the new loan, this balance of cash brought in, that can be adjusted as we need. So if I'm doing some guesswork here on what their loan is going to be, this is pretty good guesswork. If my client wants to bring in 10% and they surprise me with that, fantastic. We don't have to add an addendum making that change. However, you do have to negotiate in good faith. So don't come in here and say that you're bringing in a full cash offer when you're not. You're actually getting a loan, because attorneys can get you on that. You're not negotiating in good faith at that point. You've made it appear your offer is basically fraudulent. Okay. All right. Special assessments. If there's special assessments in an HOA, like in my HOA, we just barely voted for a special assessment that comes up in October. You can have the seller pay it, the buyer pay it, or have it split equally. Since I'm representing the buyer, I'm going to ask for the seller to pay it. All right. I like possession to take place upon closing. You can take it 12 hours after closing, 24 hours later, 3 days later, whatever you want to negotiate, okay? Seller's agent and buyer's agent. Now, again, it's auto-filled me in here, but I want to point out a couple things. Let's say that the seller's agent is Steve Stringham. He's one of our brokers in a different office. I can't remember which office he in. So I'm just going to put Equity Stringham. I can't remember the name he gave his office. So in this case, Steve is representing the seller, all right, and the brokerage is representing. Now this is a little bit complicated, so if this comes up, call me if you have questions on it. But Equity Real Estate and myself, since I'm the principal broker, I'm a limited agent for both of them, all right? So Steve isn't necessarily a limited agent because he's just representing his buyer, but he's but the brokerages and the principal brokers, I personally am, okay? So be aware of that comes into play there. And of course, you would have to add a separate form, the limited agency disclosure form. Most of the time, it's going to be different people. And I'm not sure if my audio is working or not. It says it's connecting to audio here. There we go. All right, I'm not sure if we're having audio problems consistently, if it's a GoToMeeting thing, but hopefully we're not, and this makes sense to you. All right, this just talks about title insurance. I want to highlight the seller's disclosure sections. A lot of agents screw this up. They think that they have met their obligation by simply providing me with a written seller property condition disclosure form. But that is not all that's required in this section. I've got to provide a copy of the commitment for title insurance. So if I'm a listing agent, I want to get that ordered right away, especially in this market where we're getting quick offers, because it takes a couple of days to go through. If there are CC&Rs, or if it's in an HOA, then I'm going to have a lot of those things. Copy of the most recent minutes, budget, and financial items from the Homeowners Association. That tells me if there are special assessments coming up. All of these things are automatically required. If it's a rental property and then we've got to provide copies of the leases. You don't have to ask for those separately in an addendum. It's already built in. And listing agents, in order to comply with their obligation by the seller disclosure deadline, they have to provide all of these things, okay? If you know there's a zoning code violation, or if it's recently, if the city's just made an announcement and you went to the city office and you heard about it, or the city sent out a notification that, hey, we're putting a highway through your backyard, and you know that's coming up, then they've got to disclose that kind of thing, all right? They do have liability for that. I almost always make offers subject to the due diligence condition, as well as the appraisal and financing condition. And again, I expect you to read through all of these so that you understand what they are. I almost never collect additional earnest money. I honestly wish they'd get rid of that section because nobody hardly ever uses it, and it's a little confusing. There are going to be some addenda with this one. I'm going to have an addendum number 1, and I've got the FHA VA addendum in here. If the home was built prior to 1978, then I'm also going to have the lead-based paint disclosure. All right, in this case, we're saying that our home's newer than that. Home warranty plan, I almost always ask for one with my offers, so it will be included in the transaction. It's going to be ordered by the buyer because I like to choose the company selected by the buyer, and it's going to be about $450, which is the cost for a decent plan, and I'm going to have the seller pay for it. All right, and then the title company gets a copy of this purchase contract, and their job is to follow the instructions in the contract and prepare this. So they'll actually bill the seller for this out of their proceeds. And you can even have the title company order it for you if you want to, because they're going to be paying out of the proceeds as well. That'll be part of their disbursement instructions at closing. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I guess we'll probably get counter offers a lot of times from sellers on that, right?
Yeah, we'll probably get counter offers. Usually they'll give us this. Okay. Most of the time they do. Okay. But if we do get a counter offer, then in the addendum we'll read some language that talks about how to deal with that. Mediation, shall or may. I always used to check shall, but sometimes we run into people that are, they're kind of legal bullies. They manipulate the system a lot. And I've seen people take an entire year almost refusing to mediate, and then we finally get them to court, and they say, hey, we checked shall mediate here, and the judge is like, you're right, you did. You've got to go mediate. I can't make a ruling on this right now. So nowadays, I almost always check may, because that allows my client to actually talk to a judge if there's a problem with it. Then we've got our deadlines. Now, my rule for deadlines is I like to land things in the middle of the week, okay? I don't like to do things on a Friday, because let's say that I have my due diligence deadline on a Friday. So we don't do the inspection until Friday. And of course, the inspection is going to have some issues. If I let my client stew on those issues all weekend long, guess what they're doing? They're on the website looking at new houses. Like, oh man, this house has a light bulb that's out, and I don't want to deal with this. And this is going to be, it's too stressful. And I let them stew about that all weekend, I'm going to lose the deal. Okay, and I'm going to have to start the whole process of showing them homes all over again. It's going to be very frustrating. I like to do things in the middle of the week because it gives us time to have it fixed and ready to go. So I'm going to get my seller's disclosures on Wednesday. We make the offer today. We have a day or two to counter offer back and forth. We should be under contract by Monday. They should have the seller's disclosures already filled out, and it should be easy for them to get those to me. So by Wednesday, I'm going to get those. Okay. Since I've got the seller's disclosures already, if you have a good inspector, they should be able to get you in within a week. Okay. A week to 2 weeks. Now remember that this is a big get out of jail free clause. All right. The language in here says that your buyer can cancel for any reason whatsoever, and they don't even have to tell the seller what that reason is. Okay. If they get a bad feeling about it, maybe it's indigestion, maybe it isn't, but they can cancel the contract. And so you can try to push this deadline out, and rather than have a week, you try to push it out for 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, something like that. But do remember that the further you push that out, the weaker your offer is. So if you're competing and you want to try to, make certain terms stronger than maybe some of the competing offers, then this could actually be worth money. Sometimes people think it's all just the highest price that wins the offer, but it isn't. An experienced agent's going to go in here and look at the deadlines too and say, you know what, these guys are closing in 3 weeks. And you can put in the pre-approval letter and say, you know what, my client's totally qualified. We've already gone through everything. We've collected all their financial documents. We can close quickly and we're not going to screw around. And a guy that can close in 3 weeks versus a guy that can close in 6 weeks could be worth an extra $5,000. Okay. So these deadlines can be worth cash to your client. So in this market, I've got a good inspector. We can get the job done. So I'm going to put a week there. That makes my offer more aggressive. All right. Financing and appraisal deadline. Most lenders don't want to order the appraisal because it's a $500 cost. They don't want to order the appraisal unless we've cleared due diligence. There's no sense charging my client $500 when they're going to cancel based on their due diligence deadline. So most lenders like to wait until the due diligence deadline has cleared before they order the appraisal. The appraisal can take up to 2 weeks after that. So since I've got May 24th there, I want to jump ahead to June and go June 7th for my financing appraisal deadline. That gives my lender the full 2 weeks to get the appraisal done after we've cleared our inspection. And then I've got my settlement deadline, so I'm going to go to June, and I should easily, once we've cleared the appraisal, it's going to go through final underwriting, and I should be able to close by the next week. All right, and this is a pretty aggressive offer because I'm almost exactly 30 days out from the 12th, and of course we're going to negotiate for a couple of days. So this is closing in 30 days, and that's a pretty strong offer right now. A lot of lenders are taking 35 days to get things done. There are some great lenders out there that are doing it in 3 weeks. Offer and time for acceptance. I typically give people until 6 or 7 p.m. I hate the 5 p.m. deadlines because if my client works until 5 p.m., then I'm just inviting missed deadlines. Okay, so I'm going to do 6 or 7 p.m. and that gives them a chance to actually meet my deadlines. Because if they start breaking deadlines, it weakens the contract. We have to add addenda to tie those things up. So kind of be sensitive to that. And I'm going to give them 24 hours. And a lot of times I can call the agent and say, hey, are your clients in town? Could we give them a shorter deadline? Because again, in an aggressive market, I don't want to keep the window open for competing offers to roll in. Okay, so I could ask and say, do you think they could have us a response by noon tomorrow? And if they say, oh yeah, they're easy to get a hold of, then I could tighten that up a little bit. But otherwise, I want to be a little bit sensitive to work schedules and whatnot. So this is my standard purchase contract filled out. Now we're going to look at some of the 2 basic addenda. First of all, we've got addendum number 1 up here. So I'm going to type that. It's an addendum, not a counteroffer. I'm going to type in the property address. And the nice thing about, again, the autofill is if I've used that, then that's all done for me already. Now, there are some standard supplementary clauses here that I could just fill in. Okay, I could grab these and drag them over here, and it will make those a part of this addendum. All right, so let's say that I'm an agent representing myself. I'm going to need the disclosure of interest addendum in there. I just hit load selected clauses. And now it says right here, personal interest, that the buyer is me. I'm a real estate broker, okay? But it also gives me a spot down here for an empty line. And this is where I could say, so let's say I want the seller to pay up to 3% towards the buyer's closing costs. Now I do want to mention to you that we have a closing cost addendum up here. This is new for us. So I want to load that now and show you why I recommend you understand your forms. All right, because if you knew that the closing cost addendum was available to you versus this language right here, let's read through this. Seller agrees to contribute at settlement an amount of, I could do 3% or I could just do the math on this one since it's a $200,000 purchase price, $6,000 to be applied at buyer's discretion toward any or all of the following: a permanent reduction, a temporary reduction in the mortgage loan interest rate. Now that's something that this doesn't cover. I couldn't buy down my rate with this language. Mortgage financing costs, that's covered here. Closing costs is covered here. Prepaids and escrows, that is not covered here. So there are agents that are very particular, and they may be jerks, they may not be, but technically I just said closing costs down here. And so what if my closing costs only came to $5,000? Well, the sellers agreed to pay $6,000. I'm basically giving them a free $1,000. Whereas right now, this says prepaids and escrows. I could prepay my HOA fee for another 2 years. All right, I could build that into this. And I can use up that full $6,000 even though my closing cost was only $5,000 of it. Whereas if I took the liberty of just writing it in, then I've done a disservice to my client. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so this only comes if you're aware of the tools in your toolbox, which are the different forms, which is why I recommend spend some time every day as a daily part of your business, going in and reading that paperwork, making sure you understand what the tools are in your toolbox, okay? So there's your standard basic addenda. And again, try really hard not to invent your own language here, because most of the things that we deal with have things available for us to choose from, all right? So that's my basic addenda, and I'm going to jump ahead to the next form. All righty. Again, I would put in here the property address. This is the FHA VA loan addendum. And again, this is required on an FHA or VA loan. All right, they're going to make you have this form in there. If it's not an FHA or a VA loan, then it obviously has no business being in there. So make sure you understand when you talk to your client, you don't need to get all their financial information. That's the lender's business. But you do need to know what loan program they're going to be using. All right. The buyer does intend to occupy this as their primary residence. Now these sections here, the seller shall make any and all appraisal required repairs provided that the cost does not exceed, I'm going to put $100 in. Now the reason for this is if it's an FHA loan and the appraiser goes in and says, you know what, you don't have a railing and there's peeling paint around the outside of the house, if anybody myself or any other buyer for the next 6 months comes along that wants to use an FHA appraisal, this appraisal is stuck to the property. And so even though those repairs are going to cost $1,000, they're going to have to do them if they want to sell the home. But if I put $1,000 in here, the seller's going to, and by the way, this is all my personal opinion. This isn't legal how you have to fill out the form. This is my personal opinion in negotiating strategy. But if I put $1,000 in here, the seller is going to automatically mentally deduct that from their bottom line. And I don't think that's necessary because I don't know if those repairs are going to come up or be required or not. So I'm going to put $100 in. And again, if they want to sell the house, they're going to have to do appraisal required repairs. I do the same thing here. If they've got termites, they're insane if they don't fix a termite infestation, you know. So I'm going to put $100. And obviously, if they've got termites, they're going to want to spend whatever it costs to get the termites out of their home. And if they don't want to do that, I don't want to buy the home, okay? And down here, again, I've got a closing cost section. So if this were an FHA loan, I wouldn't need that last addendum addressing closing costs. I only need to address it once. And in fact, addressing it in both places can be confusing. Agents call me all the time saying, does this mean they expect me to pay $12,000 in closing costs? So I'm going to come in here and say $6,000. Now the reason I put $6,000 for closing costs is most lenders cap you at that. They cap not at $6,000, they cap you at 3% of the purchase price that a seller can contribute towards buyer's closing costs. And that does not necessarily go up in that increment. So if I'm doing a $500,000 home, there isn't $15,000 in closing costs. You know, appraisals don't cost $1,500 now. It doesn't triple my costs on everything that I'm doing. I can still usually get, there'll be more, but maybe it'll be $8,000 or $9,000 in closing costs, not a full 15. So as you get up above $200,000, $250,000, those costs just don't escalate in an exact ratio, all right? And if you have a question and you want to get closer to this, you can always call the lender and say, what would your closing cost be for this client on a $200,000 property? And sometimes my lender surprises me and he says, we shouldn't have any closing costs. We can build it into the rate. That makes our offer a lot more aggressive, a lot stronger, right? And again, I'm going to give them, make sure you give them all the same deadlines so that they're not confused by this. So I'm going to get them till 7 o'clock tomorrow to get it done. All right, now we're done, so I don't have any nixed forms or anything. I go up here to print the PDF. I'm going to print everything, so I generate a PDF from here. And let's see here. For me, I've got to open it. And the way I like to do things, I like to now save it to my desktop. So I'm going to come down here and just save it as a PDF to my desktop. And this is the test offer. All right, now it's available right here over on my desktop. So I can close that and this. Now I can go to .loop. It's going to make me sign in again. This is a test loop we were working with earlier today. I'm going to add a document, and again, we just created a training on this, but I've got my test offer saved right here. I can just drag and drop it. Okay, now I can open that up, and I've got Sandy Seller here, so I can just add initials down here for Sandy Seller and assign that field to her or anybody else. All right? So in this case, with this loop, I haven't added anyone, so I would have to actually add the person down here. But I've got a whole separate training on .loop. But I wanted to give you the overview of the basic forms: purchase contract, exclusive buyer-broker agreement, and exclusive right to sell agreement. So, you have any questions on that?
No, I think I'm good.
All right, our new agent here who is going through the training says he's good with this, so we'll go ahead and sign off on this. And again, if you have questions, feel free to contact me, or if you're from another office, then contact your managing broker. Thanks.